Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going through all of the books that I read during the month of January. So I'll be going through a brief synopsis for each book, what I rated each book on a scale of 5 stars and why, and who I would recommend each book to. Before we dive into the books, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what my reading looked like in January. So January was a really good reading month for me, and I literally read 9 books, which might not be a lot for some people, but especially as a full-time college student, I was quite pleased with myself. I can't promise that the rest of my monthly book recap videos will be this long, and there might be months when I just don't even read, because if you watched my 2022 goals video, you know that I'm not setting any tangible goals related to reading. But anyway, according to Storygraph, I read 3,447 pages and my average rating for the month was 4.39 stars, so I generally enjoyed most of what I was reading. If you want to keep up with my reading in real time, I highly recommend following my Storygraph because I rate books on there as soon as I finish them. Anyway, let's get into the books I read. I'm mainly going to be going in chronological order, but a few will be out of order because I want to keep books in a series together in this video. The first book I read was Volume 1 of Heartstopper by Oseman. This was actually a reread for me, and my sister introduced me to Heartstopper last year, and it's basically this amazing graphic novel about this couple, Nick and Charlie. So Nick and Charlie both go to the same school, but Charlie feels like they're from different worlds because Nick is one of the rugby boys and Charlie is very much not a part of that friend group at the beginning of the book. One day, Nick and Charlie are forced to sit next to each other in class, and from there they become friends, and after that they become more than friends. This graphic novel was so cute, and it's been a long time since I've read a proper graphic novel. I loved the format, and I also loved how it touched on so many important topics like navigating sexuality and mental health. Honestly, I had butterflies for Nick and Charlie the entire time I was reading. They are just so meant to be, and I've read all of the released volumes of Heartstopper, but I know that the 5th one is coming out soon, so I'm really excited for that. I rated this book 5 stars and I literally read it in one sitting, so I feel like that tells you everything you need to know about how much I enjoyed it. Like I said before, I loved how topics like sexuality and mental health were handled, and aside from the main plot that follows Nick and Charlie's relationship, I also loved getting to see the side characters like Charlie's sister Tori, who is the main character of Solitaire by Oseman, and I am not exaggerating when I say that Solitaire is my favorite book of all time. I read Solitaire last year, and I swear I have never felt so strongly about a book before, so getting to see all the little references and the continuity throughout Heartstopper was just really special. And I love dogs, so I loved getting to see Nick's dog Nellie. Anyway, I recommend this to anyone who's looking for a super quick, lighthearted read. Even though this book talks about a lot of dark topics in passing, it's so lighthearted and easy to get through, which I really appreciated. I also reread Volume 2 of Heartstopper, and it just continues along with the timeline of Nick and Charlie's relationship, so I'm not going to go too in depth with this one, but this was also a 5-star read, and I'm just obsessed with everything that Heartstopper is. Next, I read The Vanishing by Maureen, which is the second book in the Truly Devious series. I read the first book in December, but I feel like I need to talk about the first book before I talk about this one, because the first book is the setup for the second book. So Truly Devious takes place at a fictional private school in a remote area of Vermont, and this academy is called Ellingham Academy. It was founded by Albert Ellingham back in the 1930s, I think, and he was this super rich businessman. There's 2 parallel timelines in the story, so one follows characters from the 1930s and the other one follows characters in modern day present time. I'm going to talk about the past timeline first. So this school is very sus to begin with because of its remote location and the fact that there are so many tunnels and riddles and passageways and things like that, but it gets even more scary when Albert Ellingham's wife Iris and his daughter Alice are kidnapped, and a ransom of $20,000 is requested, which is already a lot of money, but when you convert that to the current value of US dollars, like that is a ton of money. The ransom is paid because Albert is rich, but things don't go as planned, and Iris is killed and Alice is said to be missing. So Albert spends the rest of his life trying to find out what happened to his wife and his daughter, and we get to see a bunch of interviews of suspects and little clues and things like that. And then in the present day, we follow Stevie, who is a new student at Ellingham Academy, and she has been obsessed with the Ellingham case for her entire life. So now that she's actually at the academy, she is more determined than ever to actually solve this case. However, things get a little bit more complicated for Stevie when some of her own classmates start dying on campus. So now she's determined to solve more than one murder, and she has a feeling that everything ties together somehow. So this book is essentially just her trying to get to the bottom of things. And honestly, I was here for the dark academia vibes. But unfortunately, the execution just did not work for me, so I rated the first book 3 stars. The main reason why I didn't enjoy this book is because of Stevie. She was so incredibly irritating, and I swear to you, on every single page of this book, there was some mention of how she's not like other girls, and everyone else at the academy is so rich and put together, but she's not like that. When I'm reading a book, I like to be shown things, not told things, and especially not repeatedly told things, so this got irritating very quickly. I can mostly overlook quirky, not like other girl main characters, but Stevie was just way too over the top for me, and I think that says a lot. And I also hated Stevie's interactions with literally every single character in this book. She is so unnecessarily rude, and she makes everyone around her feel so bad about themselves. Also, her love interest was just not it for me. They literally talked twice and then started making out, and it was the lamest attempt at an enemies to lovers trope that I have ever seen. At the beginning of the book, it's revealed that Stevie has anxiety and she experiences panic attacks and even takes medication for them, so I thought I'd be able to relate to her in that aspect, but the first panic attack that was described was pretty realistic in my opinion, but the rest were just not it. I know panic attacks are different for everyone, but I seriously don't think anyone would act this way. So the writing was just kind of bad in that regard, and the reveal at the end of the book was just the most underwhelming reveal of all time. I saw so many reviews saying that the reveal was incredible and mind-blowing, but I literally did not care whatsoever about the secret that came out at the end because it had nothing to do with the murders. Is that a spoiler? I don't know, but I'm gonna leave it in because I think that's important. The only thing I liked about the first book was the mystery aspect from the 1930s, and I just really wanted to know who the murderers and the kidnappers were and why they chose to do this, so that's why I decided to continue on with the series even though I didn't really enjoy it. So I felt pretty much the same way about the second book in the series. I really hated Stevie and pretty much everything about the present day timeline except for her friends Janelle and Nate. I have no clue why Janelle and Nate were friends with her, to be honest, and we just get more clues and more drama, and I hated to see Stevie just becoming a more horrible person as time went on. And the fights between Stevie and her love interest were just so over the top and overly dramatic to the point where I was bored by them. Like, eventually an on again off again relationship is going to get old, and Stevie's was no different. I rated this one 3 stars as well. Then I moved on to the last book in the series, and I was just ready for the big reveal at this point. Like, I knew that I wasn't going to like Stevie in this book, and I was right about that. I actually really liked the ending of the series, and I felt like the reveal was pretty solid. I also felt like all of my questions were finally answered in a relatively satisfactory way. However, there were still like a million things about this book that I hated. First of all, there's a character in this book named Vi who uses they them pronouns, and the author used she her pronouns to refer to Vi on one of the pages, and I don't even know how that happens. Did the editors just not see that? Because I read this book once and I noticed it immediately. This made it very clear to me that the author only included Vi for very performative reasons and to appeal to modern teens, and she didn't truly care about the representation. My other reasons for hating this book were pretty similar to why I hated the first and second book, so I rated this book 2.75 stars, and I will not be touching another Maureen Johnson book ever again. If you want to read a good YA mystery, I definitely recommend Karen McManus books instead. Next, I read Girl Gone Viral by Alicia, which is the second book in the Modern Love series. It is a rom-com, and I briefly talked about this book in my 2022 goals video, so you already know that I'm obsessed with it. These books can be read as standalones, so I won't do a full recap of the first book in the series, but in the first book, Katrina is a side character, and in this book, she's the main character. So we've already been introduced to Katrina, and from the very start, we are very intrigued by her because it's clear that she has had a very troubling past and that she is now quite a girl boss. In this book, we are also introduced to Jazz, who is Katrina's bodyguard. So this is a bodyguard romance, which is one of my favorite tropes. Because of Katrina's dark past, she doesn't want to be recognized on the internet or on any sort of media, and she has a bodyguard to keep her safe and to keep her property safe, so just keep that in mind. In the present day, Katrina is an angel investor or some sort of investor, and she has invested in a cafe that she regularly frequents. So one morning she's in this cafe and Jazz is also there because he's her bodyguard, and it's quite packed in there. So this guy comes over to Katrina and asks to sit at her table because there aren't a lot of open seats left. Katrina hates interacting with people and she's just there to read her book, but she doesn't want to be rude, so she says yes. They go on to partake in some very awkward small talk, and this woman at another table takes a picture of Katrina and this guy talking because she thinks this is some sort of meet cute situation. And then she posts this picture on Twitter using the hashtag #CafeBae. This post goes viral and people are making up all sorts of theories about who the people in the picture are, because from the angle that the picture was taken at, you can't really see the faces of Katrina and this guy. When this post blows up, Katrina starts having more frequent and more intense panic attacks because she has a panic disorder and she doesn't want people finding out that it's her. She especially doesn't want someone from her past to find out that it's her because she lives pretty close to this cafe, and it would be bad if this person found out the city that she lives in, to say the least. So Jazz comes to the rescue and he takes her to his family's farm, which is in a rural part of California, and no harm will come to her here even if someone finds out that it's her in the picture. And they're all alone on this farm, so there's a forced proximity trope in this book as well. And you get to see both Katrina's point of view and Jazz's point of view, so you get to see them fighting their feelings for each other, and I absolutely loved this. I rated it 5 stars even though I rated the first book in the series 4 stars, and I think one of the biggest reasons why I thought this book was better is because of Jazz. He is the most selfless, understanding, and patient person I have ever read about, and I'm obsessed with him. He obviously knows about Katrina's panic disorder and some parts of her past because he's her bodyguard, so it's his job to know these things. And he also has a pretty sad past of his own because he is ex-military and he still deals with PTSD. Jazz is Indian American and his family doesn't fully understand him and his trauma, which was really relatable for me to read about. And I also related a lot to Katrina's panic disorder, and unlike the depictions of panic attacks in the Truly Devious series, I felt like the descriptions of panic attacks in this book were extremely accurate. And I think that you will also fall in love with Jazz because he is quite literally the perfect human being. I read quite a few rom-coms in January, so the next book I read was When Dimple Met Rishi. This book has the points of view of both Dimple and Rishi. Dimple and Rishi are both incoming college freshmen, and this book takes place during the summer before they are supposed to start college. Dimple wants to major in computer science, so we already love her, and she is especially interested in web development, which is my favorite part of computer science as well. She wants to go to this summer camp for web development called InsomniaCon, but it costs $1,000 to attend, and she's afraid to ask her extremely strict Indian parents for this money because she doesn't think her parents will pay $1,000 just for her to go live on her own for the summer and be away from her parents. However, she is shocked when her parents immediately say yes, and she finds this suspicious, rightfully so, because it turns out that her parents have arranged for her to eventually get married to a family friend's son, Rishi, and he is also going to InsomniaCon because his parents are super rich and they want him to major in computer science, even though that's not necessarily what Rishi wants, but we'll get to that later. So Rishi knows about his parents' plot to get him married to Dimple in the future, and he's fully on board because he's the epitome of a good Indian son, and he wants to do whatever it takes to make his parents happy. He's also a hopeless romantic, and he thinks that arranged marriages are a great way to fall in love with someone. What he doesn't know is that Dimple is not aware of this arranged marriage situation. So when they both get to InsomniaCon, he goes up to Dimple and he makes this joke about them spending the rest of their lives together, and Dimple has no idea what's going on and she is very creeped out by this, so she throws her iced coffee at him and then she runs away. Soon enough, he gets to explain himself and Dimple confronts her parents about this. She's upset because this just proves that her parents are not really supporting her career yet and they're just still focused on making her into the perfect Indian wife. Rishi is an absolute sweetheart, and even though he was really looking forward to getting to know Dimple during InsomniaCon, he realizes that that's not even something that Dimple wants to think about at this point in her life, so he decides to just leave her alone. However, it turns out that Rishi and Dimple are assigned partners for InsomniaCon. And before I go any further, can we just talk about how amazing the setup for this novel is? As someone who loves web development, I would absolutely love to go to a summer camp where you build your own product and compete against other teams to get the ultimate prize of working with an extremely successful woman in tech to develop your product even further and sell it. But anyway, Rishi and Dimple are partners, and this brings them closer against Dimple's will, and things go on from there. I rated this book 5 stars, and it is one of my top favorite romances and even one of my top favorite books of all time. I know a lot of people don't really like this book, and I completely understand that because I feel like it's one of those books that you just have to be able to relate to in order to enjoy it. A lot of reviews say that this book is boring, but I was fully gripped by the tech competition aspect and by the Indian family dynamics because those are both things that I can relate to. The entire time, Dimple is fighting against her family's wishes for her to settle down into a domestic lifestyle, and Rishi is fighting against his family's wish for him to become a tech bro, and I loved getting to see them stand up for themselves and become the best versions of themselves. I also adored the romance, and I thought that Rishi was one of the sweetest love interests that I have ever read about. He notices every little thing about Dimple and goes out of his way to make her happy, and he does this even though he knows that Dimple might not ever feel the same way about him. Right from the start, Dimple was like, I do not want to be in a serious relationship, and she just wants to focus on academics and career prospects, but that doesn't stop Rishi from being a hopeless romantic. There were so many cute scenes in this book, and I can't choose my favorite one, but I think if I had to, I would pick the scene where he draws her. I also loved the restaurant scene and the Bollywood dance scene and just all of it. I highly recommend this book to anyone who loves rom-coms and also feels like their parents' expectations for them are weighing them down in life. I also read the second book in the Dimple and Rishi series, which is called There's Something About Sweetie. In the first book, we're introduced to Rishi's younger brother Ashish, and this book follows Ashish and Sweetie's relationship. Ashish is getting over his ex, who he was dating in the first book, and I was honestly so glad they broke up because I found her so irritating, but Ashish is sort of a player. Well, he's literally a player because he plays basketball, but his ex was his first serious relationship, so he's still really heartbroken from that, and he's finding it hard to return to his player ways. His friend Samir is like, you should ask your parents to set you up with someone because they set up Dimple and Rishi and they're off living happily ever after, so maybe they can do the same for you. So Ashish reluctantly agrees. His mom tries to set him up with Sweetie, but Sweetie's mom is ashamed of the fact that Sweetie is plus sized, and she thinks that in comparison to Ashish, who is described as an Indian GQ model, her daughter will get made fun of and no one will believe that Ashish is truly interested in Sweetie. Ashish's mom assures Sweetie's mom that this will not be the case because she has raised her son right, which I have to admit Rishi and Ashish are the perfect gentlemen, so she did do a good job with parenting. But Sweetie's mom has spent years of her life trying to get Sweetie to lose weight, and she has internalized the notion that Sweetie needs to be thinner before she can be found desirable by anyone, so she turns down Ashish's mom's offer. Sweetie finds out that her mom declined this offer, and she decides to take matters into her own hands, and she gets Ashish's number from a friend, and she does this because she's tired of her mom acting like she is unlovable. Instead of asking him out, she challenges him to a race because she's a track athlete and she has the state record in California or something like that. Ashish loses the race and he is immediately obsessed with her because he himself is an athlete and he can appreciate a good record setter. Ashish's parents find out that he went to see Sweetie without telling them though, so in order to avoid any issues with Sweetie's parents, his parents draft a literal contract and they make him and Sweetie sign it. It basically has all the details for all the places where they're allowed to go on their so-called dates, and they're all places that Indian parents would approve of. So just as an example, we have the Hindu temple, so a literal place of religious worship, and we have a holy festival, places like that. Despite these seemingly drab date ideas that they are now bound to, Sweetie and Ashish do end up falling for each other, and we also get to see Ashish dealing with his ex trying to get back into his life, and Sweetie is dealing with her extremely narrow-minded mother. I rated this one 4 stars instead of 5, just because I got fed up with Ashish's ex trying to worm her way back into Ashish's life just as he is getting over her, and I also didn't like the setup of the novel nearly as much as I liked the setup of the first book. The whole tech camp competition vibe of Dimple and Rishi's book was better in my opinion, but other than that, I loved everything. According to the author's note at the beginning of the book, Sweetie is basically a self-insert for the author because the author grew up in an Indian household where her weight was constantly scrutinized, and I honestly loved getting to see Sweetie begin to stand up for herself and start loving herself for who she is. She is genetically plus sized because everyone on her dad's side of the family is plus sized, but her mother doesn't seem to understand this, and it was honestly a little bit triggering to read some of the conversations between Sweetie and her mother, because I have also had similar conversations in my Indian household, but this wasn't a bad thing at all, and I think it made it so much more relatable. I think if you liked the first book in the series, you should give this one a try as well. I'm planning on reading the last book in the Dimple and Rishi series in February, and it is called 10 Things I Hate About Pinkie, and we have already seen the main characters Pinkie and Samir in the second book, so I know that they absolutely hate each other, and I love a good enemies to lovers trope, so I'm excited to see where things go for them. The last rom-com that I read in January was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This book follows Luke O'Donnell, who is the son of parents who are rock stars, and so he is tangentially famous, and whenever he goes out to party, he gets super drunk and ends up in the tabloids, which is negatively affecting his image at work. To redeem his reputation at work, he is supposed to find a nice guy to publicly date so that it doesn't seem like he is hooking up with different guys on a daily basis. And so his friend sets him up with Oliver Blackwell. Oliver Blackwell is a lawyer who essentially seems like he has his entire life together. The issue is that Luke and Oliver have absolutely nothing in common except for the fact that they are both single and gay. So they decide to just have a fake relationship for the sake of Luke's job, and Oliver also needs someone to bring with him to a family event, so this works out pretty well for him too. I rated this book 4.75 stars. I just didn't connect to it as much as I connected to other 5-star reads that I've had, but it was still phenomenal, and Oliver is literally such a good boyfriend. We do get to see that Oliver is not as perfect as he seems at first glance, and Luke is dealing with a lot of family issues, but they both support each other, and this book was also full of British humor, which I really enjoyed since I adore BBC shows. I definitely recommend this book to anyone who's looking for a hilarious rom-com. And then the last book that I read in January was a middle grade mystery fantasy called The Mysterious Benedict Society. This book follows Rennie, who is an extremely gifted orphan, and he has been taken under the wing of a tutor named Miss Paramal. They come upon a newspaper ad that is asking for gifted children who are looking for special opportunities, and so Miss Paramal agrees to let Rennie take this series of tests. We get to see a bunch of mind-bending tests that Rennie and a bunch of other children are taking, and by the end of the tests, we are left with 4 children who have passed them all. These children are Rennie, Sticky, Kate, and Constance, and they are all very gifted in very different ways, which you get to see throughout the book. It turns out that these tests have been put together by a man named Mr. Benedict, and he has a very crucial mission that only these 4 children can complete. As part of the mission, the 4 children go to this mysterious school called the Learning Institute for the Very Enlightened, and they essentially spy on an evil mastermind and try to ruin his plans. I adored this book, and I rated it 5 stars. The dark academia vibes were everything, and even though I'm not the target audience for this book, it really appealed to the inner child in me, and I loved seeing how brilliant all of these children were. There was so much mystery and adventure involved, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who's looking for a cozy middle grade read. I will definitely be reading the second book in this series in February, so stay tuned for my thoughts on that one as well. Anyway, that is everything that I read in January. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you next week.